yeah, so I'm going to talk about the history of Knox and the Noble Train, Henry Knox and Noble Train. But anyway, so essentially, Charlestown, Battle of Bunker Hill was lays the groundwork for it, and we lost that battle. But when George Washington came on scene, he said we need some minesweepers, we need some armor, and so Henry Knox commissioned to go up to Fort Ticonderoga and move 59 cannon from Fort Ticonderoga down to Boston, and that was because Boston was surrounded by ships, British ships, and so he knew he needed firepower to combat the British ships. So Henry Knox and his brother William went off. They didn't have any teams, any sleds, anything like that. They went off to Fort Ticonderoga, and on the way they started. By the way, they had $1,000 to purchase all this stuff. And so they went up to Fort Ticonderoga, and they started negotiating with Teamsters that could bring the cannon down. And there was a guy named Palmer that didn't. He was out of Connecticut. He didn't do well. So they finally landed a guy named John Beckett and John Beckett Jr., who had been supplying the Fort Ticonderoga with all kinds of team locks.
I'm just going to pan a little bit.
And so they got them to hire Teamsters and they built. They had to have 42 sleds built, and so they built sleds, and it was 80 oxen and 90 men that they needed for this journey. And so they got them together, and they started down. They started on boat, came down to Lake George, Lake Champlain, Lake George, and then they started portaging over land, and ice and snow. They needed snow to make that portage. Let's see what else. They thickened the ice. They would drill holes in the ice, and that would bring water up, and then they would let it freeze, and that thickened the ice. Huh. And they had one cannon fall through. Actually, they had two cannons fall through, but the main one was the old sow. The old sow, Big Bertha actually it was, and the townspeople of Albany helped Henry Knox pull it out of the water at the bottom of the Hudson River.
Wow!
And so they renamed it the Albany. And so when that cannon arrived to Cambridge, it was called the Albany. And they would fire cannon along the way, and that was kind of a recruiting tool to prove that the cannons still worked, because they'd been idle for 10 years, and they would fire them along the way. And it was a Herculean effort. Started out with nothing, and I think it ended up costing 540 British pounds and 8 pence when all said was done.
For the whole trip?
For the whole trip.
And so they get here and they position the cannons.
So they got here, and there was a question about where to position the cannons. Should they go back to Bunker Hill? Should they go to Dorchester? And so what was happening with the British, General Howe, he was a wandering soul. He liked to chase women and watch plays. So while he was doing that, General Washington says, you know what, we're going to fortify Dorchester Heights. And they did the same thing that they did at Breeds Hill. Within 6 hours, they built redoubts. And they kind of constructed them before they even brought them up the hill. And then they put hay on the wheels of the cannon. At this point, the snow's gone, so they used carts, and they disguised the noise of the carts by putting hay on the wheels. And so within 6 hours, they got up here. They started pounding. They did a diversion. They started pounding Boston out of Roxbury. They pounded Boston out of Roxbury to divert the British attention, and meanwhile they're pulling them up onto Dorchester Heights. And then they started unleashing those cannon. It was blowing houses apart in Boston.
Wow.
Finally, Howe, he didn't surrender, but he basically made an agreement that he wouldn't burn Boston like he did Charlestown. And so General Washington said, all right, you don't burn Boston, you guys get out of here, and we'll let you go. And And they did. They went from Boston to Halifax, and on the day of March 17th, 1776, 250 years ago today.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome.